Welcome back to Astrodome Reimagined here on Houston City Beat. Mike Acosta here with you alongside Bill Brown, a 30-year broadcaster with the Houston Astros from 1987 to 2016. And he is a member of the Astros Hall of Fame and also a noted baseball author. Bill, welcome on in today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Mike. I've watched your first show, and this is a great look you have for this program. Congratulations.
Well, I appreciate it. We want to have something nice. We even have our own 60th anniversary Astrodome logo. What's going on with you? What do you have going on right now?
Right now, I'm writing a book, which is, to me, very, very interesting because it's about professional athletes who served in the military during wartime. And so it's Wartime for Athletes is the working title of it right now. I don't know when it will be completed, but right now I'm right in the middle of World War II, Mike.
Wow, that's really cool. That's you're involved with a lot of veterans initiatives as well in the community. I always see you with various functions and everything. Tell me a little bit about that influence on your life.
Oh, it's been a big influence, and I'm just glad there are so many good veteran organizations around. So if you're a veteran and you haven't volunteered for one, just pick one because there'll be something for you to do. We have a veterans committee here where we live. We're in a 55 and over community out in Cypress called Town Lake Heritage. And we have a small committee, and we have a few fundraising events throughout the year to raise some money for veterans charities.
That's fantastic. Well, I want to get right into it. You came to the Astros. You had actually started in Cincinnati, but you came to the Astros in 1987, and it was a very pivotal moment for the broadcast team for the Astros because they had just let go of Gene Elston, and Gene Elston had been with the Astros for 25 years, and Gene has not been with us for this year, going on 10 years. I can't believe that this September, it's going to be 10 years since his passing. But Gene left a big legacy, and then you were hired to come on in. You know, first off, coming into the Astros and going from Cincinnati and all the work that you had done, you'd also done some other work besides the Cincinnati Reds. Coming into the Houston Astros in that environment, what was that like for you to begin with?
Well, first of all, I hadn't done baseball for 5 years. I had been fired in Cincinnati, so I had other sportscasting jobs. And I really didn't think I'd get another shot at baseball. And so I was so pleased to have the opportunity. And it was a difficult, rigorous interview process. There were 3 finalists, and we all came in and they threw an audition at us, and that surprised us. But that's the way they decided. And so I knew it was a close call for the decision makers, but nonetheless, I was just so relieved to be back in baseball. I knew that it would be difficult because of Gene having been so popular and coming in with the franchise in '62. But, you know, I was just not really too wise to the situation here. Didn't want to know a whole lot about what happened with that. It was just time to get back to work. And you know, Milo Hamilton, Larry Durker, all the guys were very welcoming, and it was just an immediate go to spring training and hit the ground running situation.
Yeah, and you did. I mean, when you joined, I remember when you joined. I heard the broadcast with you. It was like seamless. I mean, it was great. The Astros radio sounded great, and you were on HSC at the time as well, doing television broadcasts. It was really great. It almost seemed like, I mean, yes, Gene was gone, but we had a great new voice in Houston, and I think a lot of the fans really saw it that way as well. And you went on 30 years with the franchise doing radio and television, so that's a huge congratulations to you there. But
Thank you.
Coming into Houston and going into the Astrodome, what you already knew the Astrodome had been around for 22 years when you came into town. But what were your thought process and maybe some of the experiences you had inside the Astrodome?
Good question. Because with me, it goes back to '69 was my first game there as a fan, and working in San Antonio for a radio and TV station there, we had some availability to a few tickets now and then. And so I got the station's tickets, and my wife and I drove over and we watched our first game in '69. And as you recall, you know, the Astrodome was such a phenomenon, such a worldwide place that if you were not from Texas and seldom went there, if you came anywhere close to Houston back in those days and you were a sports fan, you wanted to get inside the Astrodome and take a look for yourself. So that was my first game. And then back in the 70s, well, actually, my first major league game, believe it or not, was in 72 in the Astrodome. And I was filling in for Wade Hoyt on Cincinnati Reds telecast because Wade was in the hospital and I worked for the station that did the games. And so I was just completely new at the station, hadn't even been there 6 months yet. And they told me I'd be filling in for a legend, Wade Hoyt, you know, a Cooperstown Hall of Famer who played with Babe Ruth. And that was very intimidating. And then to boot, the first game I did that September in 72 was the day the Reds clinched the division title. And it was just absolutely a wild ride.
So no pressure that day.
No pressure, no pressure. I don't think I said 3 words, Mike, the whole game. I just let Tom Hedrick, my play-by-play partner, take it and run with it, and he did.
Yeah. That's an amazing debut there. When you go into the Astrodome and you see it for the first time, and really that first game you described in 1969, the Astrodome was the first circular stadium. I mean, Shea Stadium had a similar seating bowl, but it really wasn't considered cookie cutter. The cookie cutter stadiums came soon after that with Riverfront, with Three Rivers, and even Veterans Stadium could be considered that as well. What were the impressions? I mean, I think now people look at circular stadiums, and you had an experience in Riverfront and in the Astrodome, both circular stadiums. When you're there in 1969 in that moment, are you really thinking? I mean, there's no thought process of a cookie cutter at that time. What was the impression of seeing this environment around you?
I was completely in awe of it because at that point, I had only been in a couple of major league stadiums, Kansas City and St. Louis. And Kansas City Municipal Stadium was kind of like a minor league ballpark. St. Louis, you know, Busch Stadium was nice, but didn't have anything to compare it to. I just knew it was awesome and it was eye-popping, and I just could not imagine doing a whole season there. Of course, at that point, I wasn't even thinking about being a baseball broadcaster because I was a news reporter in 69. I was starting at the bottom of the totem pole in the business then.
So what made you want to go after baseball that took you to leading to that first game where you're broadcasting in the Astrodome?
I just always wanted to do that when I was 14 years old. That was my goal. I would listen to Cardinal games on the radio at night, trying to go to sleep, but not really, because I wanted to listen to one more inning with Jack Buck and Harry Carey. And I just fell in love with it. And I was just completely enraptured with the sport, with the rhythm of it, with the broadcasting of it. Loved everything about it. Wasn't good enough as a player to pursue that end of it. So this was my ticket. And you don't think about the odds at that time, Mike, you've got 30 jobs in the world. If you want to be a TV play-by-play broadcaster for a major league team, those odds would stop a lot of people cold. But, when you're young and impetuous and have big dreams, it doesn't stop you.
That's right. It shouldn't. You got to go after it.
Yeah.
So when you joined in 87 too, you came on the heels of the 1986 96 win Astros. They had won the Western Division. They had that dramatic series with the New York Mets and the League Championship Series, and then there was the off season. What I don't really want to call it a controversy. I guess you could in a way with the Gene Elston being let go and you coming on. And so there was excitement going into the 1987 season. What was it like with you meeting some of the players for the first time, getting to know those veterans, some of the young guys that were about to come up? Ken Caminetti came up in 1987, Craig Biggio, 1988. Tell me a little bit about, kind of setting your foot into the Astros realm.
I think I was hired around the 1st of February, Mike. So that's
Hmm.
pretty late for a
Yeah.
baseball broadcaster to try to learn very much about a team. But I was on a cram course and then just went right to spring training, went right to work. And fortunately, I had done Cincinnati Reds for 7 years back in the 70s and early 80s. So I knew the routine of broadcasters introducing themselves, making their way around to try to, meet all the players possible, the manager, the coaches, everybody in the front office. There's a lot to learn that first year, especially having been out of it for the previous 5 years. But the routine was familiar to me, and it was great to be able to work all the spring training games because I really needed that to learn the team. I just needed to see people play, even though having watched the playoff series you talked about, was somewhat familiar with the Astros. But the players were all fantastic, very easy to get to know, and there was really no intimidation with that part of it at all.
So when you were there, and 2 years into or this is your third season in 1989, the Astros had a weekend where they had two extra inning games going into Saturday night and into Sunday afternoon. 22 inning game, I think it was June 3rd, 89, and then a 13 inning game on Sunday, June 4th. And I recall that there was a guy on the broadcast that night, and I need to find a quote. I think I have it recorded somewhere. You actually mentioned that there was a guy who had flown to Hawaii from the United States, made the trip, the entire trip, landed in Hawaii, got there, and could still pick up the broadcast on television somewhere.
There are a lot of side stories to that game. Another one I like is that it was the Astros and Dodgers. So Vin Scully was doing the game for Los Angeles on TV. He had done the NBC Saturday afternoon game of the week in St. Louis that afternoon. And then he does 22 innings that night. And then he does 13 innings the next day. And then Monday, we were off. So we all just slept all day. But Vin Scully was working a doubleheader in Atlanta. So you think you like baseball?
Yeah, they always say that baseball is it's a lifestyle, right? It's how you're going to have your time consumed if you're working in any aspect of baseball, and that truly was it. What are some of the great memories that you have from some of the things that happened with the Astros, or maybe even some of the interactions you might have had in the Astrodome?
Mm-hmm. I love the Astrodome. When I was in Cincinnati, we loved coming to Houston because we knew we were going to play. There wouldn't be a rain delay. There was never any doubt that you might have in another city in the summer when there are thunderstorms in the area and things of that nature. And of course, we all hated rain delays because we spent a few hours as it was at the ballpark, and now we were adding on to that, and who knew how long they would be lasting.
Yeah.
But no, this was perfect. And, the other aspect of that was that the Astros almost always had good pitching. It was almost always impossible for the visiting team to do much hitting in the dome. They had a hard time, with the baseball in that environment. It seemed to be a little darker, a little harder for the hitters to pick up the ball, whatever it might have been. Maybe by the third game in the series, they were somewhat accustomed to it. But you can imagine coming in there the first two games and facing Nolan Ryan and J.R. Richard and maybe Joe Niekro the third game. It was an impossible task. And so that aspect of it meant, hey, we're going to have a close 3-2 game. It's going to be quick. We're going to have some doubles and triples and not very many homers. And I loved that type of a baseball game. Pitching, good defense, sacrifice bunts, sacrifice flies, just the fundamentals really were very, very important. That was just exactly what I love the most in baseball.
And you know what, too, the game at the time, we have the clocks now and all this and that. It kind of feels like it's micromanaged a bit because the way new players have come up through the system and take a lot of extra. Those games were very fluid. They seemed to people were in motion constantly. There was not a lot of wasting time, with the gloves or pitch, visits to the mound or strategic things like that coaches and players do today. The game just seemed to move along. And most of those games were an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. Those games were extremely well paced. And also the players moved along. There was more running, more stolen bases than we see now. There were more hit and run plays. So the strategy really is what many of us just attach ourselves to. We love the strategy. All right, is there going to be hit and run on this play or not? And we're always trying to think along with the managers, which really, to me, adds that element to the game that fans really enjoy.
The later years in the 1990s, the Astros had a rebuilding. It took quite a while, and then of course there was a strike. But the rebuilding that took place in 1991, it saw Jeff Bagwell come into the scene. Ken Caminetti, Craig Biggio were already there for a few years, and Baggy won the National League Rookie of the Year that year. And then by '94, the Astros were playing extremely well, but saw that season ended because of the strike, and they probably would have gone on to win their first Central Division title that year. But it wasn't until 97 and then 98 and 99, and they kind of really put it together. They retooled from year to year, but walk me through those years with the Astros, and because the 98 team in particular that won 102 games really felt like it was a World Series contender in those years.
Oh, I agree. I was always shocked that the Astros didn't reach the World Series that year, but those of us who have followed this sport for our whole lives know how many different twists and turns there can be. Just when it looks like something is a lock, it's not. But with Randy Johnson coming in that trade and winning 10 games and having an ERA of a little bit above 1, it just looked like he was going to be a dominant starter in the postseason. And he did pitch well, but we did not foresee the San Diego Padres and Kevin Brown and Sterling Hitchcock and the things that happened, and the Astros just couldn't hit enough to win in that postseason. So, there was that. I love 97 also, Mike, because there had been that void since 86 without a playoff spot for the Astros. The rebuilding that you talked about went pretty well, pretty quickly, actually, from that 91 season. Yeah. And the guys that you talked about, Biggio, Caminetti, Bagwell, all became leaders of the team. The team really came together well. It was a very, very exciting team to watch. And in 97, first time in the playoffs for a lot of these guys. All right, it's not any big disappointment to lose in the playoffs, but the expectations were a lot higher in 98. And so that was disappointing not to go any further. And then in 99, that team was a good one too. And that was one of my favorite games, was the last game of the season in 99 when Mike Hampton won the ball game and the Astros clinched another playoff spot. And as you know, on television, we did not do postseason games. So it was disappointing, of course, if you were the TV broadcaster and now all of a sudden the team's in the postseason and you're not working. But on the other hand, there was a lot of happiness for the team's success and the fan base coming out. So there were many positives too.
Yeah. In 1999, one of the things that I want to bring up, and you tell me as much as you would like to, but in 1999 in June, there was a very scary situation when Larry Dierker had a grand mal seizure during the ball game in the Astrodome. And this had never happened before. This kind of setting the scene a little bit. And if you can take me into that moment for you as a broadcaster, the Astros were celebrating the final season in the Astrodome. Larry Dierker had been the manager of the Astros since 97. He was hired in the offseason 96 after being in the seat next to you for many of the games. And you've been friends with him for many, many years. And the Astros took off and had a great season, a lot of retrospective stuff. And the manager of the Astros, who also played for the Astros for many, many years, has this seizure, and it just brings the game to a halt. It is one of the most unexpected things that could happen in a ball game. I was working in the Astros radio booth with Milo Hamilton, Alan Ashby, and Mike DeLuce Cannon, and we didn't know what was going on. And to walk me through that as a broadcaster, because no one knew what was going on. And how do you handle that moment and kind of describe the feel of what it was like to be in the Astrodome on that afternoon?
It was my worst day in baseball because here was one of my best friends, and we didn't even know at first who it was who was down in the dugout. The game was stopped, and everybody was looking over at the Astros dugout, and then we saw some camera shots of someone's legs sticking out from the bench area, but we couldn't see the upper half. So no idea who it was. And, the worst thing about that, about being a broadcaster, is just the lack of information.
Yeah.
And then we found out it was Larry. And, there was a delay while the ambulance got there.
Yeah.
And by the way, I've been told that the Astros were the only team in baseball at that point that had an emergency medical technician sitting on the bench for every game. And I think they all now do. But at that point, I think it saved his life because it took a while for that. And I could never, of course, when you're on the air and you don't have information to talk about, every second seems like about 8 minutes. It's just an interminable amount of time to, when are we going to find out what's going on? And we weren't getting any information. Yeah. And what was going through my mind, I was most afraid of, was I didn't know if Larry's wife, Judy, was at the game or home watching on TV.
Mm-hmm.
And I certainly didn't want to alarm her and the daughters, the son, the rest of the family about this. So you don't want to say the wrong thing on anything medical like that. It's really taboo for a broadcaster to try to guess or speculate. We just simply don't have any information to pass along. So there's really nothing to say. And, finally the ambulance came in. Larry was carted off. The game stopped. It was resumed weeks later. It was a very sad day. And, we all left the ballpark wondering, is he going to live? We didn't know at that point.
Correct. It's the only, I can't think of another moment like that. I remember Gene Pemberton coming down. He was the chaplain of the Astros, and the entire team kneeled down in prayer around the dugout. And that was a very striking scene because you don't see that in baseball. And the Astrodome was eerily quiet for, I think that the day was sold out. It was another, because again, these games on the weekend, they were very popular because they were celebrating the last season in the Astrodome. Did a lot of retrospective stuff. A lot of people were coming to the games, and the Astros were also playing well. The Dome felt like a church at that moment. Everybody was in prayer with the team on the field. I've never seen a moment like that ever, and I hope I don't again. But that was a very, very unique and striking moment. And so it's interesting for somebody, you think of the broadcasters, the people who are on the air. I remember Milo Hamilton kind of doing the same thing that you're describing. He's just trying to describe, trying to hear back from the station. Are we going to stay on the air? Do we have to go to commercial break? What do you do? And, in communications and broadcasting, the only thing you really can do is just kind of describe the scene, which is what you're doing at the baseball game anyway. Mm-hmm. But, I know that this was a tougher situation for you because Dirk has always been a great friend of yours, and I believe when if I'm not mistaken, when he did come back, and Dirk is with us and has had all these years and did a lot of great things with the Astros and continue to do a lot of great things. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you had actually given him the ride to the Astrodome when he returned, right?
Right. Well, he was not allowed to drive because he had a seizure. And I can't remember what the legality of it is, 6 months or something like that until he can drive again. And I was the only one, he had Mike Cubbage, one of his coaches, living close to him in Jersey Village. So Mike could have given him a ride, but Mike liked to go to the ballpark about noon every day. And Larry didn't. Larry was more of a laid back approach to his managing job, and it worked for him. We know that. But he delegated to his coaches, and he had a family he wanted to be with, so he would like to go in, about 2 o'clock. Well, that's about when I was driving by Jersey Village on my way in from Cyprus, so it was no problem to stop by and pick him up and give him a ride.
That's fantastic. So, what was your favorite moment in the Astrodome? When you talk about that, it's a very dramatic, very sad moment. But what's the one moment that when you think about your time in working in the Astrodome, and the Astrodome specifically, because I think it's really difficult as a whole to talk about your favorite moment in baseball, but maybe a scene in the Astrodome. What was your favorite moment in the dome?
I think it was that last regular season game in '99 we talked about, because we knew that was the final season there. They were moving into Enron Field the next year. And all those celebrations you talked about, honoring the dome as the season progressed, and then the team doing so well. And it came down to the final day, and they needed to win to make it into the playoffs. And Hampton pitched a great game.
Yeah.
Then we had all the guys riding around on motorcycles in the dome, smoking cigars afterwards in the celebration.
Yeah.
Well, that was just the absolute perfect end to a season, even though it wasn't the final game there because they had playoff games there, but it was the final game I did there. So that was really what stuck in my memory out of all those years I was there.
Yeah. Willie Nelson saying, "Turn out the lights" at the end of the game too.
You did.
Yeah. I remember that day meeting Craig Cullinan for the first and only time in my life, who was the first team president of the Houston franchise. There was anybody who was a who's who, former players, whatever, anybody that had to do something with the Astros over the course of those years in the dome, they were there that day, and it was really, really amazing. So tell me, just your quick thoughts on the current state of the Astros. We got to mention that at least.
Yeah. Well, Mike, I think, it was a difficult situation, certainly with losing Kyle Tucker because to the trade, because it seems to me that from what I'm reading from afar, not being on the inside, that the determination was made that he would have been too expensive to sign to a long-term deal. And I heard the figure $400 million tossed around in the media. Well, if that is accurate or anything close to that is accurate, I could certainly understand why the Astros would opt to trade him 1 year before he would have walked away. And so, I completely understand that deal. And then signing him a new first baseman, I think, is probably really going to be important, because first base was a problem the last few years. And
it was, yeah.
And Bregman, I never thought all season long that Bregman would re-sign here when he decided to select Scott Boras as his agent, because Scott Boras typically takes his clients into free agency for competitive bidding, and we see where that is right now. He still has not signed. So at some point, the team, teams get hijacked by this bidding process, and it can really hurt the team because there are other options available, but you really want to bring this guy back. But at some point, there has to be a drop dead date. I think that was the right thing to do.
Yeah. And I think one concerning thing, I think back to the late 80s when a high salary was about $4 to $5 million a year. If a guy was signing, $15-20 million 3 to 4 year deal, that was a very huge contract. And of course, it's proportional. But we are looking at $750 million contracts now. We're looking at, it makes you wonder, how far off is $1 billion contract, and what are the repercussions of having a $1 billion? Does it become a liability at that time, because you're buying into the future? You're buying into what this player is going to do in the future, and also is that person movable? Can you trade him if something happens? And all the insurance policies, and what are the repercussions on the prices of tickets and the prices of concessions? Because the income from your ticket prices for a ball club basically pay for your salaries on the roster for the baseball team for the most part. So it is a little alarming to see that we're getting to the $1 billion or at least it seems that within the next few years, we might have a $1 billion player over whatever set number of years it might be.
Mm-hmm. Every time I shake my head at the new plateau that's been reached, I think this is the last one. This is the last one. And then the next year, I'm wrong.
Yeah, yeah. Baseball never ceases to amaze,
Right.
and never assume anything. Of course,
No.
just like with anything else. Well, Bill, thank you for joining us today here on Astrodome Reimagined. I really appreciate you sharing some of your memories and thoughts. And we'll have you back on some of our other programs as well. And please, what was the latest project that you have going on right now that people can know, where they can find you online?
Well, the book is going to be titled Wartime for Athletes. It'll be available on Amazon, and that's the only place. And that's a pretty easy place to pick up a book. And I'm not sure, maybe March, April, somewhere around in there, it will be available.
Great. And where you're active on social media?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook and Instagram, and pretty easy to find me.
Very good. Well, Brownie, thanks again for joining us. For Bill Brown, I'm Mike Acosta. This has been Astrodome Reimagined. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day.